From Europe to the Middle East, more ballistic missiles have been fired in combat during the last 3 years than at any other point since the Second World War. The spread of these missiles around the world has long been assessed by the United States and its allies to pose one of the biggest challenges to global security in the 21st century. Today, these missiles are fielded by 36 nations, and in recent conflicts, we've seen the devastation they can inflict. In the Middle East, the aftereffects of Hamas's October 2023 attack have widened into a broader regional conflict that has pitted Israel against Iran and its regional proxies. Ballistic missiles play an important role in this conflict because these are one of the few weapons available to Iran and its proxies that can reach Israel. Since the start of hostilities 2 years ago, close to 1,000 ballistic missiles have been fired at Israel. A little less than 15% of the 1,000 ballistic missiles fired at Israel impacted areas inside the country, with the rest either being intercepted or failing in flight. Despite the number of ballistic missiles fired, the missile attacks did not significantly disrupt the day-to-day operations of the Israeli military, nor did the Israeli military lose any major pieces of equipment to the attacks. This is in stark contrast to Ukraine's experience in recent years against Russia. Following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, ballistic missiles have become an important part of Russia's strike campaign against Ukraine. Over a period of 2.5 years, the Russian military fired over 4,300 ballistic and cruise missiles against targets in Ukraine. Of the 4,300 missiles, 2,800 were subsonic cruise missiles. Ukraine was able to shoot down over 65% of these missiles, while on the other hand, Ukraine was only able to shoot down 90 out of the 1,500 ballistic missiles fired at it. Unlike Iran's attacks against Israel, Russia's ballistic missile attacks have had a devastating impact on the day-to-day operations of the Ukrainian military. These attacks have also had a major impact on the country's energy and other civilian infrastructure. In part 1 of this series, we will be going over what ballistic missiles are, the types of ballistic missiles out there, what countries have them, and why so many countries acquire these missiles. In part 2, we will go over how ballistic missile defenses work, the types of ballistic missile defense systems in use around the world, what countries have ballistic missile defenses, and why countries like Ukraine and Israel have had two different outcomes against major ballistic missile attacks. What is a ballistic missile? A ballistic missile is a type of a long-range missile that carries a payload and delivers it to a distant target while flying on a ballistic trajectory. Instead of being powered from launch to their destination, ballistic missiles make use of the laws of gravity and classical mechanics. This allows them to reach their targets by only being powered for a short period. Ballistic missiles come in many forms, each with its own unique design features. However, all ballistic missiles have three major sections in common: a propulsion section, a guidance section, and a payload section. Generally, ballistic missiles are separated into four groups depending on their range. Short-range ballistic missiles are ballistic missiles that have a range of 100 to 1,000 kilometers. This group includes missiles such as the United States ATACMS, Nazi Germany's V-2, and the Soviet Union's infamous Scud, which traces its origins back to the V-2. Short-range ballistic missiles are the most common types of ballistic missiles around the world, with at least 33 countries fielding tens of thousands of these missiles. Medium-range ballistic missiles are ballistic missiles that have a range of 1,000 to 3,000 kilometers. This group includes missiles such as the now-retired Pershing-2 and Iran's Khorramshahr. Currently, 9 countries field medium-range ballistic missiles. Intermediate-range ballistic missiles are ballistic missiles that have a range of 3,000 to 5,500 kilometers. Only 6 countries field intermediate-range ballistic missiles. This group includes missiles such as China's DF-26 and India's Agni-4. Intercontinental-range ballistic missiles have ranges exceeding 5,500 kilometers. 6 countries currently have intercontinental-range ballistic missiles, with 2 of the 6 countries, France and the United Kingdom, deploying these types of missiles from submarines. A 7th country, North Korea, has been trying to develop and field operational ICBMs for close to a decade. When a typical ballistic missile is fired, its flight path can be separated into 3 distinct phases. The boost phase starts from when the missile is fired and ends when the missile runs out of fuel. The mid-course phase follows the boost phase. In this phase, the missile is unpowered but still continues along its path due to inertia. During the mid-course phase, the missile is said to be exoatmospheric, meaning it's outside the atmosphere. The terminal or re-entry phase is when the missile starts re-entering the atmosphere. Aside from their ranges, ballistic missiles can be further separated into 2 distinct types: the non-separating and separating types. Non-separating ballistic missiles hit their targets fully intact as they were launched after their booster burns out. On the other hand, separating ballistic missiles have multiple sections which are separated as they're spent. In separating ballistic missiles, the section carrying the payload or warhead, which is called a re-enter vehicle, re-enters separately from the rest of the missile body. Some missiles such as ICBMs and IRBMs can carry multiple re-enter vehicles. Separated missiles have become more common in recent years due to countries trying to improve the range, accuracy, and survivability of their ballistic missiles. Much like space launch vehicles, long-range missiles such as ICBMs and IRBMs have their propulsion section separated into distinct segments in a process known as staging. These stages have their own independent propulsion systems which are separated once their fuel is spent. With each stage separation, the missile's weight decreases and its altitude increases. As the missile's altitude continues to rise, it also experiences less drag and a lower gravitational pull. When the new stage ignites, it can propel the missile to a higher altitude and velocity. This process repeats until the last stage is separated. This staging process allows missiles and launch vehicles to reach higher speeds and longer ranges more efficiently than using a single stage. Separation can also be used to increase the accuracy of ballistic missiles and help deal with adverse re-entry effects that come with longer ranges. But before discussing how this is possible, we must first understand how accuracy is measured. One measure often used to describe a ballistic missile's accuracy is circular error probable. CEP uses a specific aim point, which is usually the target, and measures the radius where half of all missiles fired at that target would fall. So if a missile has a CEP of 800 meters and you fire 10 missiles at that target, about half of them will land within 800 meters of the target. When countries such as North Korea, Iraq, and Iran started developing new long-range missiles, the missile they used as the basis for their new missile designs was the Soviet Union's Scud. This missile has a reported CEP of 900 meters at a range of 300 kilometers. If you extended the range of this missile to 900 kilometers, its CEP would worsen as a result of this range increase. Because we tripled the missile's range to 900 kilometers, its new CEP would also increase by a similar amount to 2.7 kilometers. For the Soviet Union, the Scud's 900 meter CEP was acceptable because they had nuclear warheads for the Scud, but for countries without nuclear capabilities, this increase in range came with a major decrease in accuracy. In addition to the accuracy problem, other problems start to appear as a result of the range increases. One of these problems is atmospheric heating. For a missile to reach farther, it needs to reach a higher velocity by the time the booster runs out of fuel. So as the range of the missile increases, the speed at which it exits and re-enters the atmosphere also increases. This in turn increases the aerodynamic heating that is experienced by the missile during re-entry. If this heating is too excessive, the missile will break apart. Addressing these problems requires moving away from non-separating designs. Most ballistic missiles are only actively guided for the first few minutes of flight. In order for these missiles to hit targets located hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, the missile needs to be going at a specific speed and be at a specific altitude when the boost phase comes to an end. Once these parameters are met, inertia and gravity take the missile the rest of the way to its target. There are a multitude of things that can influence the accuracy of a ballistic missile. These can include the shape of the missile or re-enter vehicle, the guidance system in use, the missile's control systems, and how well the missile can keep to its desired trajectory and other flight parameters. For a given missile design, there are two major categories of factors that have the potential to worsen the missile's accuracy. These are guidance and control errors and re-entry errors. All of these error categories are extremely complex, so the descriptions I'm about to provide are heavily simplified for the viewer's convenience. The sources I used in this video will be in the description. Within the guidance and control category, some errors can originate from the missile's own guidance system, for example, measurement inaccuracies or drift within the accelerometers and gyroscopes used in the missile's inertial guidance system. Other errors can arise due to a lack of precise launcher coordinates when launching or as a result of misalignment of the launching platform. This is especially severe for systems that are either highly mobile or else launch while at sea or in the air. Lastly, there are some errors in this category that come as a result of imperfections in the stage separation process. Once the missile is launched, these errors start to build up. Over time, these errors combine and result in deviations from both the flight path and other desired missile parameters such as the velocity, spin, altitude, and angle of attack of the missile. Re-entry errors are caused by atmospheric conditions such as wind and density and aerodynamic forces such as lift and drag acting on the missile. An important description of a missile's potential to be impacted by lift and drag forces is its ballistic coefficient. To figure out a missile's ballistic coefficient, we can use this simple equation. This is the mass of the missile. A larger mass leads to a higher ballistic coefficient. This is the drag coefficient of the missile. A more slender object will have a lower drag coefficient, which also gives you a higher ballistic coefficient. This is the base area of the object, and a lower base area gives you a higher ballistic coefficient. Ballistic coefficient and drag are closely related, as drag, or how much an object decelerates, is inversely proportional to its ballistic coefficient. In simple terms, the higher the ballistic coefficient, the less drag an object experiences, and the faster it moves through the atmosphere. Because non-separating missiles re-enter the atmosphere intact, they have a large mass on re-entry. This gives these missiles a high ballistic coefficient, which in turn means they descend through the atmosphere at extremely high velocities. Due to the guidance and control errors we discussed before, non-separating ballistic missiles always re-enter with a slight angle of attack. When this slight angle of attack is combined with their high descent velocity, these missiles generate a large amount of lift. This lift leads to non-separating ballistic missiles missing their targets by several hundred meters. The first step to addressing both categories of errors requires separating the re-entry vehicle from the rest of the missile's body. Guidance and control errors can be minimized at launch with the use of prepared and pre-surveyed launch positions whose precise coordinates are known. Highly mobile launchers can use satellite navigation systems such as GPS to obtain precise coordinate data. This was actually the reason the US Navy invented satellite navigation, to allow its submarines to accurately target submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Separation errors can be addressed through the use of boost control systems. These come in the form of devices that can be either integrated into the re-entry vehicle body or as attached to the re-entry vehicle for a brief period before detaching. Boost control systems are meant to provide more fine-tuned corrections to re-entry vehicles once they are separated from their main stages. These systems use small thrusters to reorient the re-entry vehicle while it's in space. Large missiles such as ICBMs have post-boost vehicles which can carry multiple re-entry vehicles. These post-boost vehicles can independently guide re-entry vehicles to different targets, thus allowing a single missile to hit multiple targets over a large area. Addressing the re-entry errors is more complicated. Once the re-entry vehicle is separated from the missile's body, there is a significant decrease in weight, which in turn decreases the ballistic coefficient significantly. This has the potential to worsen the re-entry problem. As discussed before, a high ballistic coefficient means less deceleration, a low ballistic coefficient therefore means more deceleration. Because the re-entry vehicle now has a low ballistic coefficient, it descends at a slower speed. This can result in atmospheric forces blowing the re-entry vehicle off its flight path. One way to address this issue involves making the re-entry vehicle more slender. This results in a decrease of the drag coefficient, which in turn increases the re-entry vehicle's ballistic coefficient. However, when it comes to re-entry vehicles, high ballistic coefficients also come with their own downsides. Because the re-entry vehicle is not traveling so fast through the atmosphere, it will start experiencing severe heating. If this is not addressed, you risk having your re-entry vehicle disintegrate. A common solution to this problem involves the use of ablative materials. These are the same kind of coatings used in manned re-entry vehicles such as the space shuttle. These are coatings on the body of the re-entry vehicle that, when exposed to heat, vaporize and dissipate heat in the process. Another method for improving missile accuracy involves turning ballistic re-entry vehicles into a guided maneuvering re-entry vehicle. This process involves adding a seeker, aerodynamic control surfaces, and a guidance control system to the re-entry vehicle. The first ballistic missile to use this style of guidance was the United States Pershing II. As the Pershing re-entry vehicle starts to descend, the seeker scans the ground and compares what it detects with onboard data of the target scene. With this data, the onboard guidance system can calculate how far the re-entry vehicle is from its target. If the guidance system determines that the missile is far away from its intended target, it sends input commands to the control surfaces which change the re-entry vehicle's path. This process is repeated until the re-entry vehicle hits the target. The whole process happens incredibly fast, with the seeker rotating and scanning the ground multiple times per second. Having a separated missile also allows designers to increase the survivability of their ballistic missile. This is because non-separating ballistic missiles have a larger surface area than separating ones. This gives these missiles larger radar and infrared signatures, thus making them easier to detect. Separating missiles, on the other hand, don't have this problem because the re-entry vehicles have smaller surface areas and can be made into shapes that reflect radar energy less. To further reduce the likelihood of detection, some missiles can have their booster stages release light decoys such as chaff, flares, and balloons. The booster stage can also be rigged to break up and release thousands of small fragments. All of these methods together create a cloud of debris that has many objects that are all flying alongside the missile's re-entry vehicle. Because the re-entry vehicle already has such a small radar signature, the defender needs to sift through this debris cloud to find the re-entry vehicle. This protects the re-entry vehicle from being detected and engaged during the mid-course phase, which is the portion of flight when re-entry vehicles are most vulnerable. Once the re-entry vehicle starts to re-enter the atmosphere, drag helps separate the lighter decoys from the heavy re-entry vehicle. This makes it stand out, thus making it easy to target without worrying about wasting missiles on decoys. Survivability can once more be increased during this stage by making use of a maneuvering re-entry vehicle. By pre-programming a set of randomized maneuvers, a maneuvering re-entry vehicle can deviate from its ballistic trajectory and do maneuvers that are hard to predict. This has the potential to increase the survival chance of the re-entry vehicle. Many countries have incorporated some of these design features into their ballistic missile designs. However, the technological complexities involved in implementing all of these features into a single design means that only a handful of nations field ballistic missiles with all of these features. The reasons countries acquire these missiles are as varied as the types of missiles they use. However, ballistic missiles as a category of weapons have a number of qualities that make them very appealing when compared to other platforms. While exact cost figures for ballistic missiles fielded by most developing nations are hard to come by, estimates indicate that these systems are cheaper than modern aircraft, ships, and even tanks. Even if a nation has the financial capability to acquire these weapons, ballistic missiles require significantly lower maintenance, less training, and a fraction of the daily upkeep. Additionally, aircraft and ships need constant investments to improve their survivability. You have to deal with ever-improving anti-air, ground, and ship systems around the world. These improvements require significant investments into research and development. For developing nations, this investment might prove too costly. Aside from the cheaper upfront costs associated with acquiring or developing these missiles, the cost of defending against them might also influence why some nations invest in ballistic missiles. Most nations around the world have some kind of rudimentary air or coastal defenses, but only a limited number of countries have systems that can defend against ballistic missiles. This is because ballistic missile defense systems are incredibly expensive. A Patriot battery costs $450 million, and a THAAD battery costs $1 billion. To put these numbers into perspective, the most advanced fighter aircraft money can buy today, the F-35A, costs $100 million. As a result, many nations that would be on the receiving end of ballistic missile attacks have no way to counter this threat. This makes ballistic missiles more appealing to developing nations than other types of weaponry. Many short and medium-range ballistic missiles from North Korea and Iran have longer ranges than fighter or ground attack aircraft available to most developing nations. These missiles also travel at greater speeds than aircraft and are therefore able to reach their targets in minutes. Ballistic missiles also need significantly less infrastructure than aircraft or warships, so the facilities that handle them can be moved underground or else hardened to a significantly higher degree than air or naval bases. This increases the survivability of these systems while also concealing the activity of ballistic missile units from surveillance assets. This is something that is incredibly hard to do with air and naval bases. Because of their long range, high mobility, and reliance on smaller hardened infrastructure, ballistic missiles are hard to target and destroy. Successfully destroying ballistic missiles requires the opposing party to have long-range aircraft with advanced sensors that are capable of carrying sophisticated air-to-ground munitions. This is required in order for the opposing side to penetrate the enemy's air defenses, find the launchers, and target these buried facilities. Thus, merely dealing with these missiles imposes a high technological barrier on the opposing side. One must invest in advanced aircraft that make use of stealth technology and survivable munitions that have both long ranges and advanced warheads designed to penetrate deeply buried targets. There are also additional capabilities that must be invested in, such as aerial refueling and the ability to suppress and destroy air defenses. These qualities give ballistic missiles a unique advantage over other weaponry available to many nations that do not have or cannot afford modern armed forces. Some countries also seek these missiles because they can give them a level of regional influence that cannot be obtained through other weapons. These missiles do not have to be sophisticated, nor do they need to be employed to have a coercive effect. Even unsophisticated ballistic missiles, when fired at large fixed targets such as cities, can present the defender with extremely difficult choices. When these weapons are paired with chemical, biological, or radiological payloads, the threat of use exerts even greater political pressure on targeted nations. An adversary of the United States armed with ballistic missiles can employ the terror of use against neighbors that host US forces. The damage these missiles can inflict on cities can have a demoralizing effect on the civilians of that nation. This can undermine US relationships in the region and complicate coalition building efforts, as the political cost of both hosting and working with the United States might be seen as too high. Aside from directly targeting allied nations, advanced ballistic missiles such as China's DF-21 or DF-26 can raise the cost of intervention for the United States. This can be done by using these missiles to directly threaten a handful of large bases where US forces in the region are concentrated. This has the potential to further undermine perceived credibility of US commitments to regional allies. Ballistic missiles have played major roles in multiple conflicts that stretch all the way back to the Second World War. However, intercontinental range ballistic missiles and nuclear warheads occupied much of the discussion about all things ballistic missiles for much of the Cold War. While debates raged about the threat of nuclear Armageddon during this period, conventional ballistic missiles spread throughout much of the world. These missiles complemented many other conventional weapons in the arsenals of friends and foe alike. These missiles have made a major resurgence in the 21st century, and just as they have played major roles in past conflicts, these missiles will continue to play an important role in current and future possible conflicts. The difference today is that, unlike the Cold War, you're more likely to be on the receiving end of a conventional ballistic missile rather than a nuclear one.